Now entering the Bitcoin Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Law and Blockchain Podcast, hosted by Amy Wan, CEO of SageWise, a safety net for smart contracts and consultant for Security Token Academy.
Hi, this is Amy Wan, your host for the Law and Blockchain Podcast. And today we have a special guest, Ken Moyle. He is the former General Counsel of DocuSign. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. But obviously, as you can tell, today we are talking about e-signatures on the blockchain. So Ken, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Amy.
Absolutely. We're very excited to have you. Ken, do you want to first introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Well, I am a lawyer, but don't hold that against me because I've been working with startups in the technology space for my entire career as an in-house counsel. And prior to that, I was in sales and sales management. So definitely I'm on the business side of things, and was, as Amy, as you said, the general counsel of DocuSign for nearly 10 years, back when we were trying to get the ball rolling with e-signatures and met with a lot of resistance and confusion, very much like we're dealing with today with blockchain.
Fantastic. So let's set the stage real quick. Can you give a general lay of the land in the e-signature space now versus when e-signatures were first coming out?
Sure. There's a lot of similarities actually between what we were dealing with back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s with e-signatures. Like I had mentioned, there was lots of resistance, lots of confusion, lots of fear of technology. It may sound quaint now, but the concept of executing a contract online was pretty foreign to a lot of people, and the attitudes and the legal framework for supporting that was still in the early stages. Even though we had a general overlay statute called the eSign Act and several state statutes that supported it, there were still, you still had to deal with people, and people have different ways of doing things and are resistant to change in a lot of cases. So here we are today, almost 20 years later, and we're sort of dealing with the same type of issues. We've got folks that are resistant to change. We've got responses in the state legislatures and even the federal government in Congress who have maybe a tenuous understanding of the technology and are running about making laws anyway. And sometimes those laws do more harm than good. So a lot of times it requires not only a legal understanding, but some lobbying ability and some education outreach to make the road a little easier to hoe.
Very interesting. So, so here's the 8,000-pound gorilla question for you, and it's the crux of today's show. Is e-signatures, done on the blockchain better than just traditional e-signature, without any sort of hashing on the blockchain, and why?
Well, I think if you look at the general, undergirding of blockchain, it is a digital signature. It's cryptography, and digital signatures have been the undergirding some of the early concepts around electronic signing and executing of documents going back to the 90s. So using what we call digital signatures outside the blockchain context, I think had sort of a tough start and a tough road in terms of usability. And I think usability is going to be the key to taking a signature from the current sort of simple electronic model that we have now and making it a digital signature, a blockchain-based paradigm work. There's going to be a need for a lot of user experience redesign consumer education, and again, bringing folks along and making it much easier to use than I would posit that it is today.
Interesting. So user experience is going to be very crucial. I mean, my opinion is that people shouldn't even know that they're using blockchain, right? It should just be that front end, really great user experience. And then to the extent that you need to, authenticate the document, again, you should never have to learn how to code or anything like that, right?
Absolutely. And in order to get to that point, we're going to have people learning to code that maybe didn't before, like lawyers, for example, or at least have that ability to cross that magical chasm between legal, marketing, and the technology folks, to be able to really come up with ways of making all that stuff work under the surface, and making it transparent to the user.
So then, assuming that we can get the user experience there, why would, e-signatures on the blockchain be any better? Like, what are the advantages?
Well, I mean, the advantages obviously are the immutability, the evidentiary components that are involved in proving out a signature in the event of a dispute or repudiation. So the way that digital signatures were intended to work was to be able to defeat that repudiation. And of course, technology always advances and gives folks new ways of getting around the commitments that they've made, or new ways of basically tainting evidence. So blockchain, its immutability and its transparency is obviously helpful in an evidentiary context. And then eventually you'll find that I think more and more standards and legislation will start dictating that a blockchain be used in order to have sort of a decentralized consensus on what actually happened.
Yeah, so let's break that down a bit. I think what you're talking about is, the other day, for example, I e-signed something on, I think it was like Adobe PDF or something like that. But there is nothing stopping me from printing that out and maybe, I don't know, adding a 1 or 0 to, $1,000 contract, and suddenly, it's a contract supposedly worth a lot more, or somehow doctoring the document. Traditionally, and it seems like technology has caught up to allow people to taint these documents, even though we have e-signatures today. Is there anything that the e-signature industry today is doing to combat any of that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think most of your basic e-signature services are using a hash mechanism for being to detect any kind of disruption in the integrity of the document. So I think that's kind of done and done. I guess the issue is that there's always, beyond just be able to, alter a document after the fact. I think it's an issue of being able to trust the process by which these document integrity principles are upheld. And for example, if you've got an e-signature process that is homegrown by one of the parties, naturally that party is going to be have to defend their process in the event of a dispute, because they're the fox guarding the hen house. It's their product, it's their software, it's and it's their storage mechanism that's being used. Similarly, a blockchain can take that sort of centralized or controlled model and decentralize it and give it more of a democratically determined way of consensus on whether the document is actually a genuine document or not. and using the same type of, and probably more robust type of a cryptographic signature.
From what you've seen, how often does the trust process, or the alteration of documents, how often does that become an issue?
I think the issue, it becomes an issue often in disputes and attempts to repudiate. And, in a signature dispute, you're going to get, one of several arguments. One is, it wasn't me who signed. You didn't properly authenticate me, and it could have been anybody. That's not what I signed. This is the document. I signed a document, but it wasn't this document. You need to be able to prove that. Or this document, I signed it, but I didn't intend to sign it. You tricked me into signing it. I didn't know I was signing something. Those are the typical consumer arguments in repudiating documents, so that's the framework from which we go after this, and basically it is a evidentiary question. And the more you can do to back up, rebuttals of those arguments, the better off you are.
So let's talk about evidence for a second, and the authentication of evidence. How are documents authenticated today if there's like an e-signed document? And the next question I'm going to ask you is, how might that process be different to the extent blockchain is involved?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we already dealt with the kind of the pain of an evidentiary process that was based in paper and going to electronic. And a lot of early on, when we were dealing with electronic signatures and digital signatures, litigators would say, well, I don't have any way to authenticate this in evidence.
Ken, are you there?
Yes, I don't have any way to authenticate this in evidence. And therefore, I can't use electronic. The fact is that the tools available. Yeah, so we dealt with this issue before in the context of, comparing how we would authenticate a paper document versus how we would authenticate an electronic document. Way back when, litigators would always tell us that, I know how to authenticate a paper document and a signed document. I don't know how to authenticate and prove out an electronic record because I can't prove with the tools that I have who signed it and how it was preserved. And of course, that's an argument that is easily defeated because the tools available for proving out a digital signature are much more robust and much more definitive than paper records. So take that to the next step, and that is, now that we are accepting electronic records as evidence and being able to authenticate them under the business records exception to the hearsay rule, you have the ability now to, again, walk a finder of fact through the process by which a blockchain signature is both authenticated and how the record, most importantly, how the record is now immutable and part of a non-changeable record. But it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, so I was on a couple of e-signature platforms last night, just kind of looking this up, and it seems like when there is some sort of authentication, evidentiary dispute, that a lot of these platforms, they'll provide maybe some sort of certification of completion or something like that.
Right.
Are you aware whether a lot of these e-signature platforms, whether they ever get subpoenaed for, for like the actual document itself? Do these companies actually keep the original copy of the document, and how do they handle all these document authentication requests? I mean, the sheer scale must be insane.
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually the number of disputes that arise through these e-signature systems is amazingly low. And again, there's no one source of that information other than anecdote. But if you talk to the folks within these companies, you'll find that they're very infrequent requests for information. either subpoenas or requests from the court to basically provide some testimony, either written or oral, as to the mechanism by which these third parties process documents. Whether they save the document or not is up to the individual user. What is kept as part of the record is the as you call it, a certificate of completion, or the summary, the history, and the process by which the document was put through signing, preparation, and storing. And there's, of course, normally a hash function or some sort of pointer to be able to tell what the hash of that document looked like, so that you could recreate it if necessary using the hash algorithm.
So what do you think can make the e-signature industry today better? What are incumbents not doing?
I think they need to basically look at what the future holds for agreement, how parties are going to be doing business online, and realize that, again, the act of physically signing things with a script signature is probably going to become, again, a quaint anachronism. Someday we're going to be doing it in a much more simplified way, and that's going to happen gradually. But if we're not moving towards a process by which we're adopting new technologies, whether that be biometric authentication technologies or blockchain style storage technologies, there's going to be disruption. There's always disruption, and so the players that are currently leading the pack need to be aware that they need to keep innovating.
Fantastic. There's a couple of projects out there today that are developing blockchain-powered e-signature solutions. What advice do you have for them?
Keep it simple. Keep the user experience top of mind. One of the I think observations I have within the blockchain ecosystems right now is the fact that we're very, very heavy on technology, and we're pretty light on usability. And if you look at the most successful e-signature products out there, they have a laser focus on the user experience. They want it to be compliant, but they also want it to be easy. And right now, I would say that suggests that
Great.
Most blockchain things aren't easy.
So for those of you who are listening, SageWise has actually put out a release of DocuSign, which is our version of blockchain-powered e-signatures, mostly because, in building out our dispute resolution infrastructure, we thought, oh my gosh, how do you even sign any of this, right? So we'd love for you guys to go take a look. It's DocuSign.com, BLOKUSIGN.com. Ken, how can people find you? How can they get in contact with you?
I'm at Twitter at MoyleKen, MoyleKen. And you can also reach us at k6partners.com. That's K, letter K, number 6, partners.com. And you can always find me on LinkedIn under Ken Moyle.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you. Bye, Amy.
Bye.